Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Survivor's Guide to Families podcast. I am Jonathan, and this is my wife, Lanita. And we're just taking some time to have a few discussions. And last week we talked about gratitude, the ripple effect that gratitude can have, and how it can unleash a source of joy in our lives. And so last week we talked about elevating optimism and well-being through gratitude. I believe it's a route to optimism. And so we kind of spent some time in that. And this time I want to talk about the expressing of gratitude and how that has a ripple effect in our lives. And so it's just kind of that idea of this. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. This is something that when I sent this topic, we were chatting about it and sending messages back and forth, coming up with ideas for what to talk about. I didn't see the eye roll, but I could feel the eye roll when I sent this because I feel like I do this better professionally. I do this better with my kids, but for whatever reason, this has been a struggle for me to express this to my lovely wife. And so, this is as much a discussion for me. And as I was researching and looking into this topic, this is something that I'm doing for myself. And that's part of the reason we talked about it last week, the gratitude journal, and now that I'm a few entries in and kind of doing that, I sat down, yesterday and wrote in it, and it felt easier even after just a few times entering it. And I think it's just because sometimes repetition is what's key to that. And so I think that's just, why is it important? Do it, and then realize that when you do something over and over again, it's going to come out in a way. And so that's why I think the gratitude journal is such a great thing. We have a resource if you want that. There's a link. Maybe we'll put that again in the bottom of this video, just to help you out. We have two ways, right? We have it free. You can download it, just have it on your iPad or computer or phone or whatever to read through, right? Or print it out if you want to do that. But sometimes printing is most expensive liquid on earth, right? Is ink. And so we have one that we put on Amazon, and it's cheap so that you can have a resource to do that, and it just comes to you in a book format. I think it's what, $10.
$8.95.
$8.95. So
and most of that's Amazon's
and
pricing.
So by the time you average cost of printing and all of that, maybe it'll be a good resource for you. So just to remind you and make you aware of that. But the ripple effect of sharing the love, expressing gratitude to others, is such an important thing.
It really is. And I know, like you said, we were talking about this, and I really try to express gratitude, especially I know a lot of times, like Jonathan does a lot of the cooking and a lot of the stuff in the house, and I usually try to be like, wow, that was really great. Like, thank you for this. And just being grateful in our marriage, because when you're more grateful, it makes us feel better in our relationship. And it's funny because as we were looking into this and doing the research into this, one of the first things that I noticed is it was talking about how being grateful in your relationship increases satisfaction in your relationship and connection and commitment. So when you have a partner that is really grateful and is expressing it, because sometimes they're grateful and they don't express it. Like, I know Jonathan's grateful for the things I do. He just sometimes doesn't express it. And then sometimes he expresses it a lot. And then in those moments, I'm like, oh, this feels great, right? But it's talking about like the connection and how it brings better satisfaction in your relationship and a deeper commitment in your relationship. So just by saying things, just by saying, hey, I know you were home with the kids all day today and they're still alive and you did awesome. Like, I know that sounds silly, but sometimes I just need to hear that. Like, maybe nothing great happened that day, but him coming home and saying, I know you were with the kids all day, and just in the few minutes I've been home and listening to them bickering, the fact that you had to listen to that all day and they're still alive, like, kudos to you.
Well, and along those lines too, when I come home and the house is spotless the way I like it, right? The counters are clean and like the kids are, you know,
Does that happen?
dressed
No.
and have their hair brushed and stuff. Homeschool life, right? So, um, that's, it's like, oh, to me, I'm grateful for that, right? And it's easier for me to be like, thank you for doing that. Thank you for keeping the house clean and all that. Um, and but what I have to realize is the flip side of that, and I think that that's something that I've been trying to be intentional with is um, even though I'm not grateful when I walk in the house and I'm
Why?
tripping over 1,000 pairs of shoes and the house is a disaster and the kids look a mess and just everything is it looks
Life
like a
happens.
bomb went off. This is probably not the greatest moment to be critical, right?
Mhm.
Because something happened this day, right? This day did not go according to plan, I would assume, right?
Yeah,
And
well,
so
usually.
coming in guns blazing, be like, why is this and why is that? And I've done that, and it
Mhm.
doesn't help anything, right? It just
Right.
makes it worse. And so maybe realizing, maybe like you said, finding that simple and going, you know what? Hey, kids are alive. You're alive. I'm grateful that
We'll do better
you
tomorrow,
know,
right?
I can be grateful that I know the kids are safe, right? I know that when
Right.
you're with them, that I have full confidence that everything's going to be fine, whether the house is clean or not.
Yes.
And so I think that's the thing. You can be grateful even in the moments that drive you crazy
Mhm.
because of that mindset of going, man, this day must not have gone good. And so me piling onto that, probably not a great way of helping the situation and things like
Mhm.
that. And to speak to that, like the idea of um, being more grateful uh, and expressing that to each other, and then having a positive impact on your relationship. I
Yeah.
found that interesting too. That people are more committed, right?
Mhm.
I think a commitment is an issue in our society, right? With
Yeah.
50% of more ending in divorce. Um, what if we became more grateful in our relationships,
Mhm.
not because of what we see, but because of what's unseen, maybe because of what's done, not noticed or things like that. And maybe even though 8 out of 10 things you're not grateful for, you point out the two things you are. What effect would that have
Right.
in your marriage, in your relationship? Even with my kids, one of the things that I try to do is not when whether I'm just talking to them or whether it's in just conversation or even in correction. I don't want to constantly focus on the negative,
Mhm.
right? Constantly focus on what they did wrong. I want to instill in them. I know that you talked back and I talked back as a kid, and I truly believe that that's you question everything, which drives me crazy about my kids. But I question everything. I asked my parents, the joke in my house was why. Jonathan asked why everything. I grew up asking why do we do this. I didn't just say well what they'd be like well we're doing this well why. Like it was just a constant thing, and it drove my parents crazy, and it drives me crazy now as a parent. But I have to remember that that's a great thing because it's a sign of somebody who's creative. It's a sign of somebody who sees,
Thinks
wants
outside
to
the box.
understand things, wants to
Mhm.
actually comprehend. I enjoy the process of how things are made, how things are formed, how things are planned. Like from the beginning of conception to that, that's just the way my mind works, and I love that. And so sometimes the things that drive us nuts about our relationships, our kids, all these things are the very things um, that you are, right? The things that probably
Right.
drive you the craziest are what you are, but also the fact is that is maybe their greatest strength. The area they struggle in the most could be their greatest strength. And so instead of putting those things, always focusing on the negative aspect of how that's being portrayed or done, or how they are doing it at this moment, focus on I know that this is something because you're going to be a great leader, because you're creative, because you want to understand things. Like those looking for the twist of the positive.
Right, and always having that, and like you said, it's that ripple effect, because the more I'm grateful towards my husband, the more I'm grateful towards my kids, they then have an attitude, I think, that is more grateful, because they aren't always feeling bogged down. They're being lifted up. And so then they, in turn, I've heard my kids when, especially, our oldest is, he's only 5 years older than our youngest, but even then, I've heard him when she does something be like, wow, Keely, you did that really great. Well, the reason he's doing that is because it was modeled to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we, especially for our children, I mean, we talk about, there's a lot of things that, everybody can look back and say, well, my parents didn't do this or my parents didn't do that. And so, like, I think for me, like, being grateful is something that I want modeled to my children, that when they look back, they say, my mom was grateful and she gave it to me. And so now in turn, I am grateful. Like, that ripple effect of, like, it keeps going and going. And I think that's important in our society, because our society is very ungrateful at times for the things that we have. And I think that people are drawn to people that are grateful. So not only will this affect your relationships in your home, but I believe in the future, as my kids get into the workforce and they get out into the world in their own lives, that the more grateful they are, that people will be drawn to them, that jobs will, bosses and employers will be drawn to them, and that they will succeed more in life because of their attitude. And trying to instill that into them now. And that's not always easy, because, like you said, sometimes it's easy to not always lift our kids up, or not our spouses, because it's easy to pinpoint on the things that we see that we don't like. And shifting our minds, shifting our process of thinking.
Well, and I think so often we don't see the fruit of it. And so if we don't see the fruit, it's hard to keep going, right? It's hard to push through in those moments. You're like, you might be a grateful person. You might be somebody that passes that on well, that does that in a good way. But it's kind of funny because the other day,
Mm-hmm.
we were playing a board game called Sgtf. Great game. And one of the questions was for that you basically as a group have to decide who about that
Good
person,
question.
and then there was a bunch of statements, which one best fit the person, and so it was Lanita, and it was all about what kind of person they were, right?
What
Or
kind of fan
fan
I
they were.
am in the stadium, like what our kids would say, or, well, all of us. And there was, of course, the annoying, loud, obnoxious fan, and there was the yelling at the ref type person or whatever. And then there was the cheerleader and a few other things. And so then everybody goes around, and you have a card that correlates with each
And they basically
thing
all picked
in all of the
cheerleader.
kids.
And
Mm-hmm.
they even said afterwards, well, mom's always cheering us on, always
Mm-hmm.
encouraging us, always lifting us up. And it might have been the first moment
Right.
that the kids actually acknowledged what you have been trying to do for their entire childhood. And and so there is fruit even sometimes when we don't see the fruit. um, our kids are watching, right? They see the negative and they see the positive. And so it's just to push through to understand that our kids are sponges. They're picking up everything we put down and put out, and that can be dangerous and that
Right.
can be great. And so the question is which one is it going to be for you?
Which ripple effect will you
Which
have?
effect you
Yeah,
have, a
because either
negative
way, it's going to
or a
happen.
positive, right? You're going to be, are you going to end up being the old man, get off my lawn guy, or you're going to be the grateful young person, like that. I thought it was funny because I thought of that scenario of, they're like, if you're more grateful, you'll live longer, and
Supposedly.
which I think potentially like
sure, you're going to be happier or whatever, um, but maybe not live longer, right? I've seen marathoners drop dead, fully in
Does that
shape.
mean they're
That
grateful?
doesn't, no, I'm just saying, but like, and then you have people that are ungrateful and are not ungrateful, unhealthy, and just don't live their lives well. They're not active, and they live to 100, right? I mean, like, there's, it's not always now quality of life, I think, is the difference, right? Would I rather be the get off my lawn old man where nobody wants to be around me and my family doesn't come to visit and I just have no relationship with them, or my neighbors don't want to talk to me, or they run inside, when I walk by, like, or do I want to have good quality life? Even if I live shorter, what's the quality of my life, right? And
Well, and
so,
I think of, like, I know when my grandpa passed away, and I know even your uncle a couple years ago, like being at their funeral, and I didn't live close to my grandparents, so I didn't see them as often as I probably would have loved to have seen them. But hearing the statements that people made about, like, he was always so positive. I mean, I know one of the big things is they talked about he was always singing or always whistling, and like having those positive things. And I feel like that's part of this ripple effect too. Is in the end, when it's all said and done, do you want people to look back at you and think, I liked being around that person because of their positiveness, because of their always lifting me up, or in the end, them being like, I mean, they were kind of always grumpy, or I didn't see them much in the end because I didn't want to be around them. And that starts now. That's not even when you're older. It starts now, and what we put out towards our friends, towards the people we're around, and the people we love, and even, like I said, at work, around things, because our
well,
attitude affects things.
yeah, and it's interesting that I came across this study for employment, right? So it was talking about employees who feel better about themselves. 70% would
Hmm.
feel better about themselves if their bosses are more grateful, and 81% said that they would work harder if their
Hmm.
bosses are just simply more grateful, if they felt as an employer that they felt that their boss
Appreciated
appreciated
them.
them.
Hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
And they would work, 81% of them would work harder at their job. Like, so as leaders, as owners of businesses, as
Hmm.
bosses, right, managers, like, this not only just is something for the family, but this trickles into your business and your work life. Like that,
Yep.
if you are a more grateful employer, your employees will work harder for you,
Hmm.
and it requires
Well,
intentionality.
I would
It's
think
this,
longevity too.
right,
You're
and
going to have less turnover because they're going to enjoy where they work.
it's true. I
I
mean,
mean,
you look at, the high turnover rates of jobs. It's because
hmm,
people aren't valued. They're not valued monetarily. They're not valued emotionally, and those things affect whether you stick around somewhere long term.
hmm,
And if it really just came down to being more grateful for those people, what would the impact uh, be for that?
yeah,
And that's a big thing. I think that really is important. It's kind of something too that I think is a generational thing.
yeah.
For me, um, you know, I get a gift from someone, especially my age group, right? Um, uh, I express
Thank you so
grateful,
much.
I
Yeah.
gratitude for it, appreciate the item, I love,
Hmm.
all that, and then it's done.
Right.
But if I receive a gift from my grandparents or someone in that age group, um,
You
I
better send
can
a thank you note.
Right, exactly. I can say thank you, and I can express so much gratitude towards them in the moment. Thank you so much for this item. I'd see them later if you didn't open it up at the moment, and express that to them. But if they don't get a note,
Hmm.
I didn't do it. I wasn't thankful for it.
Yeah.
And
To the point where one year his grandma, he said thank you, but didn't send a thank you note. And then the next year, she sent him a, a check, a gift, and a thank you note to send back to her.
yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
it was really funny. We were like, oh,
I got
and we
a card
realized
and
at
a
that
thank you card
moment
to respond to the card.
that
You know.
just saying thank you wasn't enough for her. Like that was a moment. I mean, it wasn't very subtle. She sent a thank you card for him to send back. But since then, we have been very cautious of making sure we respond in that way because we realized that she really wanted that.
Mhm.
So sometimes I guess you don't always have to be subtle about wanting thank yous. Maybe you'll get more thank yous in the long run then.
Right. But I think the point I bring up with that is maybe it's some of it's knowing your audience, right? Some of it's
Mhm.
how you express that gratitude based on generations.
Yeah.
But I also think maybe we need to go old school a little bit. Maybe our generation needs to learn to express. I
Yep.
honestly think you know what, it's interesting. That I just saw this thing about how um, this next generation, kind of like Gen Z, they're printing out pictures, right? We kind of went from this thing
Right.
like my parents had pictures all over their walls of all of our family members,
We
right?
had buckets
Right, and
of
just
prints
and my parents,
in
my
our
mom would
house. Yeah.
scrapbook, right, and she'd take hours to scrapbook and put out these things about our trips and just life
Mhm.
in general and whatever, and like and then there was this shift to all digital, right?
Yep.
Everything's digital, everything's online, and now there's like this shift back
Because what do you
to
do with the digital
prints,
prints, right?
and
Yeah.
and so I think um, part of the reason for that is I think a shift in mindset of like tangible things and um, being kind of in that moment. And so I think maybe we should go old school a little bit when it comes to gratitude.
Mhm.
Maybe, you know, one of the things that we were reading about this in is, you know, having thank you cards just at the ready, right? To write somebody a note. Um, you know, what TV show is that where they're meeting with the it's Psych.
Oh, is it? And the thank you
He's
cards.
meeting with
Yes.
the head of a I
A
don't know, a gentleman's
gentleman's
club or
where
whatever,
wow,
and not a club like that, but
right.
like, you know, to teach
They're
men to
raising up
be
gentlemen.
gentlemen.
Yes.
And they're meeting with him and you know, asking about you know murder, right? And so they're investigating, and as they're talking to him, he
He's
is writing out a
giving
thank you, and he literally hands it to him as they're leaving. I bid you good day, sirs, and they leaves, and
Here's
then
your
they
thank
open
you.
this up and like, what person does this? Like, this is weird. Um,
Yes.
maybe we don't need to be like that, but maybe we need to be more like that of being intentional and going, you know, above and beyond and showing gratitude,
Well,
not just with our words, but with tangible acts back.
I think about it personally too. Like when somebody says thank you and you walk away, but if they send me something in the mail, like a thank you card, like I do feel better. Like I don't better, but like I feel that they're
They
grateful,
took
even though they
extra
told me
time,
thank
right? They
you.
took extra
Them sending me that
moments.
card
Yeah,
makes me feel good. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess it's not just the older generation. I think that um,
is yearning for
likes
that
that. I
connection
think
and
it's a
community.
lot of us that want that connection and want to feel like what we do matter. I think that's the ultimate thing is we always want to feel like what we do matters to somebody else. And like you said, either having a card, I know they even mention at work, like having thank you cards in your desk or having them at the ready, I think would be a huge thing. And even if you don't want to go so far as a thank you card, um, you could find digital thank you cards even that you could text or message even after the fact.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, you can try to bring it up to this age, but I also think that sending stuff in the mail, everybody loves mail that's not bills.
That's true.
So,
If I get something that's not a bill, I'm like, what is
what?
it? You know,
It's
like
very
because it's
exciting, isn't it?
most of the time
Or
the other
flyers.
the other day
Flyers.
we just had this decent sized
Snowstorm.
snowstorm come through, and the poor mailman came to bring me junk. Right,
I think,
one letter of junk, and I'm like,
yeah, you're
this
like,
guy had to
really?
go out in the snow to deliver that to me.
I
So
didn't, that went in the garbage. Sorry, mailman.
you know,
So,
I think that you know, it's interesting. I came across this thing. It's called the Gratitude Project, and they talked about how science um, has proven um, that being thankful can rewire our brains
mm,
to be more resilient, optimistic, And I think that those things can lead to a greater good, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
how many of us need to be more resilient in life? I think how many of us
Yep.
need to be more optimistic, which is what we talked about last week, right? Like, I'm optimistic. I think is a symptom of gratitude, and so
Hmm.
if our brains were rewired, rewiring doesn't happen overnight, right?
Right.
It takes 21 days to start a new habit, right? As a counselor, I always tell people that it takes like 21 positives to rewire a negative, to combat a negative. So if you say something negative to someone, you have to say an extreme amount of positives to wash that one clean. It's
Hmm.
it's crazy how that works. And so when I tell people that, it's like, wow, that's crazy. But what if we thought about that a little bit more and go, man, do I really, not because I don't want to be grateful, but do I really want to put in the work of, like, if I say a negative thing and having to combat it with 21 positive things, or, an extreme
Hmm.
amount of positive things? What if I just didn't say that one negative thing? Maybe,
Yep.
maybe that's what you need to work on more, is not necessarily expressing gratitude, is not being the negative person as often,
Going
right?
back to what our parents told us when we were young, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And I think the reason that was a thing that was said all the time, I don't feel like I hear it as much anymore, but back when we were younger, is because I think there's a lot of truth to that. Like, if you can't be positive and express gratitude, then maybe you shouldn't say the thing you're thinking, because it's not worth it. Sometimes in our relationship, it's not worth it to say the negative thing, because it's just going to cause issues. And I'm not saying that you avoid
Right. It's
issues.
not
Like, if there's
about
things in your
bottling up
relationship, right,
things,
it's
right?
not that. But sometimes it's just better to not say anything at all and wait. And I think sometimes the point of that is if you can't say something nice right now, you need to sit on it. Because I think a lot of times when we sit on things, the feelings pass and you realize, oh, it wasn't as big of a deal as
In the
I thought it
moment, it
was.
was, but in the long run, it's that wasn't a big deal. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that that's true. Like, I think that the idea of you know of that pause of saying, you know what, I think it's lost on, in some respects as a culture, right? The idea now is, um,
Well, we've got our typewriter warriors.
right.
Social media has made it
It's
easy to
easy
be
just to
mean.
say mean things because you're
Hmm.
so far removed from those people that it doesn't matter. But I also think it's my truth, right? And so I need to tell people, need to know my truth.
Right.
People don't care about your truth, like, right? Like, it's not, the reality is like, we think that we have something so important to say, or we have the right to be that type of person, and be negative in those situations. And sometimes it's like, you know what,
There's
if
only
you don't have
one
anything
truth.
positive to say, then don't say it at all. Less is more
Yeah.
in that situation. And so for some of us, it's not necessarily about it much. Maybe we do need to say, be grateful, and express gratitude and thankfulness, but also we need to learn to filter better. And I
Hmm.
think as a society, we are terrible at that, right? We have leaders of our free world that are terrible at that, and have been terrible at that. And so and um, what if that was an area we got better at? What ripple effects would that have
Hmm.
if we did that? If our brains rewired and we were more resilient? And I think that's part of it too, right? Is if
Yeah.
we were more resilient, then we wouldn't fly off the handle when somebody says something, because we have to say something back. Like, just because someone talks poorly about you, or says something about you negatively, um, I, the Bible's clear. It says, "A gentle whisper turns away wrath."
Hmm.
Boy, I think that's
And a
lost.
harsh word stirs up
But
anger.
a harsh word stirs up anger.
Yeah.
Some of the, like, when somebody's yelling at you, whether it's a boss or a spouse or kids, like, just talking to them in a smooth, calm voice. Boy, if you want to get back at somebody, just
Don't
do
get
that,
angry.
because it just throws them off, right? They want you to scream back, right? But what if we were just calm?
Mhm.
took what the scripture said, because a harsh word stirs up wrath. Like, is that really what we want our marriage to be? Is that what we really want our homes to be? Or do we want our homes to be a place of love and hope and grace and gratitude, or do we want our homes to be full of wrath? Just because you're right, and this is important as a marriage, and even as an employer, or as an employee to a boss, just because you're right
Doesn't mean you're
doesn't
right.
doesn't mean you have to say it, right? Doesn't mean
Right.
you have to do something about it, and that, I think, is such a huge key to this. And in the big picture, um, we want to be, if we want to rewire our brains and be more resilient and be more
Mhm.
optimistic people, um, we just need to focus on those
Ourselves.
small things in ourselves, and being grateful, and noticing, like I said before, there might be 8 things that drive you crazy, but look for the 2 things that are good,
Yeah.
and focus on those things. And I think that's why people who are optimistic and happier people, as they say, happier people, they might not have less health issues than other people, but they look at the positive things that they do have, and
Mhm.
they really focus on that. Um, One last thought before we kind of end. I was reading in Genesis chapter 28, verses 18 and 19, and Jacob is told by God to leave where he was, to go to another city, and he to meet his wife. Right, he was looking for his wife, and so um, he's in the middle, right? He's in a spot where it's between the 2 places that he was going, and he rested for a night. And it says he grabbed a stone and he laid his head on that stone. And in while he was resting, he had a dream. He had a dream of what God was going to do in his life, and through his life. And so he woke up and he took that stone, and it says he turned it on end, and he anointed it with oil, and he named it Bethel, which means house of the Lord. And he said that this is the place where the Lord met me. And I just wanted to end with that thought, because I think for us, being grateful is just in the moment going, God did something good happened, and celebrating that in the
Mhm.
moment, really, and turning that rock and saying, this is the place where the house of the Lord is. This is where God is. This God did something here, and celebrate those things. Reminds us of those milestones. For us as a couple, we our first anniversary, we were at a pretty um, a park, a national park, and we collected this rock, and it looks like a heart, right? And
Mhm.
I have this to this day, and we display it in our home, and it's kind of a subtle, wasn't maybe intentional at the time, but
Right.
a reminder to us of where we've come from the last 15 years, like what God has done in our marriage, and serves as a reminder. And so maybe for us, if we celebrated these small victories, small achievements, small moments of seeing what God is doing,
Mhm.
that would lead to a more grateful, happy, optimistic life. And so I just thought that was an encouragement to me when I read that, and I thought maybe you'd be encouraged by it as well. And so, any last thoughts before we end? All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us for another conversation on optimism and gratitude, and how we can unleash that, and just the ripple effect of optimism in our lives. We hope that you were encouraged, challenged. If you want to like, share, follow what we do, we just want to have honest conversations about real life topics, and hopefully encourage you along the way. So, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.